Today on
Doomed!
Actually, it's about ethics in journalism. For real this time! Just take that in for a second, everyone. I'm not gaslighting you. This episode is actually about ethics in journalism. Today on the show, we're going to start out by talking the bizarre controversy over journalist David Sirota being hired by the Bernie Sanders campaign. Is there some sort of weird conspiracy going on here? We'll look into it and see on today's show. Before we go into that, though, I would like to remind you all that you can support this show by going to patreon.com/mattbinder. And if you got a few bucks, you can donate monthly to make sure that this program keeps on keeping on. And also that it can grow. But without any further ado, let's get right into today's show. I'm going to bring us up on the YouTube live stream for all the great YouTube live stream watchers. La-di-da. All right. Joining me now is independent journalist Walker Bragman, who wrote a piece in Paste magazine called "The Atlantic Accused David Sirota of Secretly Working for Bernie Sanders. But Where's the Evidence?" Walker, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you. Well, not always, because it's your first time on the show, but I'm sure it will be always a pleasure.
Of course, in the future. We'll put a pin in that.
Right, for sure. I have faith in you, so that's why I said that.
So I'll try to live up to that.
So, Walker, thank you so much for joining me. I've followed your work on Twitter, and I've read a number of your pieces, and we'll actually be talking about more than just one on this episode, I think, if we have time. But let's get into the reason why I asked you on the show today.
Because you like my hair.
Because I like your hair. It reminded me of
yours.
A much straighter version of my hair. My hair's a little bit more wavy. Yours is a little bit, I guess, is it naturally like that, or did you use a flat iron?
This is from the Salon O Pillow.
There we go. And people are going to bring it up now in the feed. Last episode, we talked about, with my guest in the last episode, Mike from the Humanist Report, we discussed Beto O'Rourke jumping in the race. And I had said...
Quite literally jumping
in the race, off of a counter, right? And I had said that, and this is before the donations this was on the first day, before the donation amount came out, and I had said that if Beto raised anywhere close to Bernie's amount, first I had floated the idea of live streaming a colonoscopy or something like that. But thankfully, we settled on I would get a haircut. And it looks like I will be getting a haircut because Beto outraised Bernie Sanders. Again, it was half as many donations, and we don't know exactly what individual donations means as opposed to individual donors. But I didn't say number of people. I said money amount. So I will keep up to that word. And
you're a man of your word.
That's right. I will soon be getting a haircut. Didn't happen yet, but it'll be happening. Anyway, let's get to
the sidetrack us.
Well, no, don't worry about it. It was going to come up, I'm sure. So let's get right to it. So, Walker, why not just start at the very beginning and tell us what caused this whole controversy? What did the Bernie Sanders campaign do this week for there to even be an issue about who they hired?
They hired an unethical, underhanded, dastardly investigative journalist who for years has held big money and people in power accountable on both sides of the aisle. David Sirota is somebody I respect very much as a professional. He's somebody that I know, and so when he announced that he was working for the campaign, I thought it was good news. I mean, it's good news for Sanders. Our loss in journalism is Sanders' gain. And he was announced with a number of other hires, including Brianna Joy Gray from The Intercept, another great hire.
Former guest on Doomed. She's been on an episode.
Well, lucky you.
Gotta throw the plug in.
Lucky, and I'm sure lucky her as well.
I'm sure that's the reason why she got hired as Bernie Sanders.
I mean, there you go. I mean, who knows where I'm going to end up?
Right.
So the news broke and it was great. And then at 4:00, the Atlantic published an article that Bernie Sanders just hired his Twitter attack dog, in reference to Sirota's many takedowns of centrist Democratic candidates and figures. And the narrative, it fits so many narratives, right? Like it fell right into the Bernie Sanders is divisive and his online supporters are unhinged and disgusting. And so it checked a lot of familiar boxes for people. And it also was, I mean, Sanders has built his brand on integrity, and puts himself forward as an issue-based candidate. And his followers like him for that very reason. And I think that there's this impulse sort of in the DC punditry and media world to kind of bring everybody down to the same level and show that we're not all that different. Like maybe in that scene in The Dark Knight where he's like, you're trying to show that everyone in this city is just as sick and horrible as you, like that.
That was a very good impression of what's his face as Batman.
I spent 30 minutes preparing that for this. No,
I believe before the show started, you had told me that you had pulled an all-nighter, and I believe that's the reason you pulled the all-nighter.
Well, now the secret's out.
It was for the impression.
It was indeed. So the article comes out and it makes several claims, but the most damning one is that Sanders has been Sirota has been working for Sanders behind the scenes since December of 2018 to kind of clear the field, if you will, for the Vermont senator and allow him to have an easy primary. And there was no evidence in the article. First of all,
right. Let's actually back up just a little bit before we jump into the whole before we jump into the whole aftermath of that article. Let's discuss sort of what people were saying when they found out David Sirota was hired, because for a long time people had assumed that, on Twitter, there's clearly people who have a strong dislike for Bernie Sanders. I get it. Some people are a little bit more, extreme in that feeling and sort of, instead of having actual reasons for not liking Bernie, they just don't like him straight up. And
gosh, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Usually they have a little donut emoji in their Twitter username. But anyway, so Sirota, is a progressive journalist. He's never hidden the fact he's worked for, the Young Turks, who, clear as day, are a progressive journalist organization. It's called advocacy journalism. It's when you make it clear that you have a certain position and you use facts to argue your position, or you cover stories, that basically advocate for your positions, whatever they may be. There's right-wing advocacy journalism. There's left-wing advocacy journalism. There's advocacy journalism across the political spectrum. There's advocacy journalism outside of politics. It's a thing. As long as you're upfront and clear about it, that's what it is. It's completely legit. It's journalism. It's called advocacy journalism. The word journalism's still in there. And David Sirota has always made it clear who he is, what he supports. He's never been one of these, I contacted the Bernie Sanders campaign, and he's worked for Bernie Sanders 20 years ago. He's always put it up front who he is. Now, you can dislike David Sirota for those reasons, okay, that's fine. But to, put across that he's some sort of journalist hack for ascribing to those positions and letting those positions basically shape the reporting he does, it's just not true, because he's made it clear who he is. I don't know how else to put it.
So I think what we're seeing is that there's a solid group, maybe very online, but also I suspect very Beltway, that doesn't really trust moral conviction about anything, and approaches politics very cynically, and thinks that this is if Sirota is going after Democrats like Kirsten Gillibrand or Beto O'Rourke or Joe Biden, it must be for a political agenda, and couldn't possibly be because he genuinely believes that those candidates are flawed for ideological reasons. And I think we're seeing sort of a clash between an ideological wing of the Democratic Party and I don't want to use the term pragmatic, because I don't really think it is pragmatic. I'm going to call it cynical, a cynical wing of the party. And I also don't think that there is really much of a difference between advocacy journalism today and just journalism. I think that everybody has an agenda. They have their own sets of beliefs or biases or preferences that come through in their work. I certainly do. I think that that's it becomes very apparent. But when you start from a conclusion and then try to make facts fit, that's when it becomes problematic.
Right. Listen, it's. I would argue that if we sat here today and wanted to name off outlets that partake in advocacy journalism, it would probably be a lot quicker to name off outlets that don't. I mean, if you're a liberal or progressive who likes, the more, party-centric Democrat, you probably read, and I think these are great outlets. You probably are familiar with Think Progress. You're probably familiar with, Media Matters. I mean, great outlets. I have had people on this show who work at those places. That's advocacy journalism, though. They're working at liberal/progressive/leftist organizations that are doing journalistic work. It's that simple. We see it on the right with, I don't know, Breitbart, the Daily Caller. Advocacy journalism doesn't mean that it's positive. Breitbart sucks. Daily Caller sucks. But they're crystal clear about who they're backing and who they're for and what guides their reporting. If you're logging on to Breitbart and expecting some sort of, I don't know, nice article about Hillary Clinton, you can't be shocked when you don't see it. They make it quite clear they're not going to give you that. People thought a problem with, people brought up the problem with Steve Bannon joining the Trump campaign as it somehow being the problem of how close Bannon was to he was working for an outlet that did reporting, if you want to call it that. But the issue there wasn't that, Bannon used to work in some sort of, news outlet. The issue there was Bannon was still connected to the outlet and was feeding information to and from the campaign to the outlet and from the outlet to the campaign, and was basically using Breitbart as some sort of propaganda, pushing campaign apparatus. That was the issue there, because throughout history we've seen people go from journalism into politics and from politics into journalism. It happened in the Obama campaign. And the Obama presidency too. Jay Carney was a journalist.
Right. Matt Stoller did a whole list of journalists that transitioned into politics. I mean, and I think that the Washington Post did an article on this where it said, like, ideally political journalists and political operatives would be completely separate, but you knock down a couple, walls, and there you are. You're in this. You find yourself in the real world. You're in the same area. I think that it's sort of the norm, and maybe a little disappointing at times, but overall, I think that there are ways to maintain your integrity within that system.
Right. Well, I mean, it's, if you ask me, it's harder than ever now, because you're asking journalists who are working basically in a, frankly, dying medium, to not, you take their skills elsewhere. Where else is a political journalist going to go? They can continue writing journalism, which is great. If they could find, if they're one of the lucky few who are able to maintain a career doing that, then perfect. Absolutely. Of course, there's, the internet has brought, along with the struggles of the industry, the internet's also brought outlets where people can go and start their own independent journalist outlets and, use Patreon like I do to try to prop that up. That's great. But not everyone can do that. And they're political journalists. The journalist is one part, politics is the other. There's a whole industry of money to be made in politics, and I'd tell you, I would say actually, as the journalism industry is struggling, there's probably more, more areas to make money working in politics than probably ever before. That's an industry that's basically growing.
It is, and it is a little. I would be lying if I said that I weren't troubled by the loss of journalism, or as we understood it. But at the same time, I also know a lot of journalists who aren't classical reporters, in the sense that they wouldn't. The way that they operate within the political world isn't how journalists operated in, say, the 1950s. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I just think that it's a difficult industry. It's a dying industry. I expect more journalists to go into politics as time goes on. What's really bad is when you don't disclose it, which is what this article alleged that Sirota had done. Because I don't know if you remember this, but in 2016, after the WikiLeaks email leaks and or email drop and the Clinton campaign emails came out, it turned out that Clinton's campaign was working with bloggers to kind of coordinate media narratives.
Right. And
that was never disclosed. You had people like Sadie Doyle, who, I think Sadie's fine, but I mean, we have our disagreements, but I think she's fine. But it was problematic that she didn't disclose it, that this was never disclosed, and it came out. And so that was obviously, not great. But
it should be noted too, while that's obviously was a scandal when it came out and the emails were leaked, campaigns have honestly been doing this forever. They try to promote a narrative, and they try to push out that narrative by pitching basically stories, like as if they were freelance writers pitching to outlets. They pitch story ideas to journalists to try to get them to write them. And it's one thing to receive a tip, and also, though, I should say that some of those emails I saw and some of the writers they pitched, frankly, I think some of those writers would have been writing takes on what they were pitching anyway. Yep. Like I saw there was one email where they were trying to promote, I don't remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to spitball here with something that's close to it. But they were trying to pitch some sort of, take on women's right to choose, abortion rights, pro-choice rights. And I believe they were pitching the pro-Clinton narrative on that to like Jessica Valenti or something like that. And you know what? Jessica Valenti would have written a piece on that issue regardless. They didn't need to pitch her on it. So when it came out, I was like, oh, if anyone gives Jessica Valenti shit for this, that's just stupid, because this is her lane. She's going to cover it anyway. This is one of the issues where it's not an issue to me. So
right.
So there's both sides to it. However, at the same time, the whole Bernie bro narrative was pushed by people in the Clinton campaign, and some writers ran with that from the campaign. And when When, to me, that's a little bit more problematic because that's where you're taking this narrative that they want to flesh out. It's not just like, hey, look, we have this policy we put out. Can you cover it? This is, hey, we're taking something that's happening but exacerbating it, and we want you to cover it in this way.
Well, that was such an underhanded campaign tactic, to begin with, and I think that you raise a good point that was especially problematic because, of course, if you go on the internet, you're bound to find vitriol, hate, spite, trolls, from on all sides. I mean, it's certainly not limited to Sanders, but singling him out for that, it was an effective campaign tactic, but it really, I always felt that was particularly disgusting. And the fact that they were working with journalists to do that, or bloggers, was equally troubling.
Right, right. Like I said, there's two sides to each one, right? Right.
Whereas even if Sirota had been, talking to the campaign and getting fed stories, at least the stuff that he's done is factual or verifiable. Like, this person had this position, this person said this, right, as opposed to this random troll who doesn't really represent anybody but themselves, now is emblematic of this campaign, my opponent's campaign.
Right. Well, I guess I'm going to disagree with you a bit there because I think this part depends. Now, if it's the Sanders, if any campaign is pitching a journalist on some sort of narrative idea, I would say I would say underhanded not to disclose it, but at the same time, it depends. Like I said, if it's something Jessica Valenti in that example is going to cover regardless, and the Clinton campaign is just letting her know that this policy was released, then that's legitimate to me. You don't need to disclose that. If there's some sort of, like the Bernie Bro narrative, that's where it becomes, ethically dubious to me. But then I'm going to say there's another tier here. Now, if Sanders' campaign is doing one of those things and saying, hey, Sirota, Bernie put out this policy, cover it, cover it if you want, here it is. That's legit to me. If, however, Sirota was being paid by the Sanders campaign during this time, then that's completely a problem. And
so
Sirota,
he wasn't.
Right. We're using, I'd like to make this clear, we're hypothetical here. You have to disclose that, first of all. Probably would not be able to write it for an outlet like Guardian or the other news outlet he was writing it for. I would say
you need your own outlet.
Right.
Something that sounds reliable. Something like if you're running in a Democratic primary, something that really puts in people's minds Democrats. No donkeys? No. Blue. Something about blue, and you would want people to share it. Yeah. Or you'd want a nation of that your end goal is a nation of Democrats, a blue nation, if you will.
Right.
Sorry.
No, you're absolutely blue nation. Right. Well, yeah, no, absolutely no. But for real, not for real. I'm just right now, actually, as I'm trying to think of what to say next, I'm thinking in my head basically a slideshow of all the headlines I was laughing at during 2016.
I have a folder.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. From Blue Nation Review, aka Share Blue. But anyway, let's get back to I think we had a good discussion about what would be a problem if you're a journalist, if you're working with a campaign in such fashion. Now let's get to what happened in this specific case. So you actually spoke to the Sanders campaign, and actually maybe we should still move back a little bit. So the Atlantic put out this piece. Who wrote the Atlantic piece again?
Edward Isaac Dover.
So Dover wrote this piece. And right away, there's a shitstorm online, and the whole, I came out before that piece dropped. I came out and basically said, I brought up advocacy journalism. I brought up that, it's clear that's what David Sirota is. It's clear he was someone who was a progressive journalist. And then this article came out, and people were tweeting it at me, like, oh, see, told you. And then the issue to me becomes this. When did Sirota work for the Sanders campaign? If he was being fed information during the time he was working for the Sanders campaign, that's a problem. If he was working for the Sanders campaign and covering 2020 stuff, that's a problem. However...
Wait, can I stop you right there?
Yeah, sure.
If a campaign is giving a journalist information, tipping off journalists, that's kind of how the industry works today. I mean,
right.
Like, it's only a problem if they're saying, like, we want you to write this angle, and that's something that all of this becomes in practice, I think, very muddy. Like, if a campaign is campaigns communicate with journalists all the time. And candidates communicate with journalists all the time. It's just how the industry works. And you build a Rolodex of contacts in the hopes that you do get these stories. The problem becomes if you sacrifice what you would normally write to get more stories. Like, access journalism is a problem, but it's also sort of how everybody operates,
right?
At the major scale.
So what you're saying is basically, someone within Kamala Harris's campaign, they feed you, hey, we came across this in our research about Beto O'Rourke. You look into it, find out the facts yourself. They basically gave you the tip. It's legitimate to write about it.
Yes.
However, if you kill a story that you come across about Kamala because of that connection you have with someone in her campaign, then that's a problem. Just to make it clear for everyone, obviously. What I was talking about with Sirota, though, and I'm glad you corrected me if I didn't get this across right, was if he was actually doing any sort of work for Sanders' campaign. The second you have that direct connection where you are, even on a trial basis, working for the campaign, I think he could still write about politics. Can't write about anything that would have anything to do with Bernie Sanders, though, in terms of his running for president, which means you have to stay out of the 2020 stuff.
If he's on their payroll, I think that would be if hypothetically a journalist were working, or getting paid by a campaign, getting
paid at all, freelance,
getting paid at all by a campaign or a candidate or a PAC that's affiliated or in support of a candidate, that sort of thing becomes very problematic.
Right. And if that came out, David Sirota's wrong. Exactly. Doesn't matter how factual what he did was, he would be wrong. But your piece proves that the Atlantic had no evidence to report what they did. So let's get into that.
So let's, if I can bring it back to December, Sirota tweets out, look what I came across on Open Secrets. Beto O'Rourke is taking all this money from the fossil fuel industry. And he gets dogpiled by everyone within the Beltway that's a Democrat is just on him. And subsequent investigation into that would reveal that, it turned out that he had broken his no fossil fuel money pledge by taking maximum amount donations from oil and gas executives as well as employees within the industry. So he was sort of vindicated, but the narrative kind of stuck that Sirota is a hitman and pro Sanders, and maybe there's a connection there. So we fast forward to a couple days ago, and the announcement comes out that he is going to be joining the Sanders campaign, and it's just for a lot of people it just clicks. Like, oh, maybe we were right all along. And Dauvert's article kind of fed into that. And not kind of. It did feed into that. I think intentionally. So his sources for this were Sanders' campaign manager, Faz Shakir, and people unnamed and not included in the original draft.
Which is fine. It's fine to have sources that don't want to be named.
Of course. Of course, and I've granted anonymity to people, in my own work. So I would be pretty hypocritical to say otherwise. My point with this is that really in his original draft, his original piece that goes up, Shakir is the only one who is cited on the record, and the main damning allegation is attributed to his statements. But it's not a direct quote that makes the damning allegation. It's Dover.
Right, exactly. And it's as a writer, I can tell you it's I think written quite well if you're trying to get something across without, people who are untrained in this work, without them noticing. And I have a screenshot of this part in the article, the Atlantic article, that claims that Sirota was working for the Bernie Sanders campaign while still covering 2020 and writing about Beto O'Rourke. I grabbed this part of the paragraph because this part of the piece, because this paragraph, and I highlighted the line that really matters. This is the part that basically caused all this controversy. Let me pull it up on the screen. So for people listening to the podcast version of the show later, let me just read. So Shakir, Sanders' campaign manager, confirmed in an interview on Tuesday afternoon that Sirota had been in an advisory role prior to his hiring on March 11th. Here's the quote. "He was advising beforehand," end quote, Shakir said. And remember, that's it. That's the quote. The rest of it is written by the Atlantic writer, explaining that Sirota's informal work for Sanders goes back months and was meant to be a trial period to see how the senator would work with a speechwriter. He was advising beforehand is the part in quotes, the part that's actually attributed to Sanders' campaign manager. Explaining that Sirota's informal work for Sanders goes back months is not a direct quote to Sanders' campaign manager.
Right. And that's where you get into trouble.
Right.
And obviously, I mean, can we be frank? An obvious hit job is an obvious hit job. This was an obvious hit job because even that quote, even saying it went back months, at that point, you're not saying that it went back to December. That's the author of the piece inferring that and then writing it and an editor approving it.
Right.
And it going live and going viral and getting picked up by USA Today and the Washington Post. 2 articles in the Washington Post about it. Right. I mean, this was red meat for anybody who wanted to sort of unmask Sanders and show that he's just as bad as every other candidate. He's just as dirty. Batman voice.
Right,
that.
Right.
And
well, I won't go as listen. I don't know what his the writer of that piece's point was in writing that. I'm gonna assume that this is probably what happened. He was told this information and thought he had something, and published it because he thought he had something. He knew he was gonna get attention for it. He probably maybe even he's claiming he's got sources that told him that he's information saying that it went back. I don't know who his sources are.
This is the funny thing, right? Like after the piece goes live, the Guardian comes out. John Mulholland of the Guardian comes out and calls it patently false, and says he wasn't writing for us when he was working for when he was looking for a job with Sanders and his response is you like uncritically accepted the Sanders campaign take and Sirota's take. You didn't like look into it. And I've got other people who can corroborate this. But if you read the piece, that claim isn't attributed to anybody else. It is attributed to Sanders' campaign manager, who subsequently came out and said that he had not only reached out to Dover to correct the claim, but that that he had been brushed off.
Right.
So, I mean, this...
Well, here's the issue, though. he's claiming that the Sanders campaign can't be, trusted on this or whatever. But who are his sources though? Who are those anonymous sources? Again, I know they're anonymous sources. He's got to protect them because that's how this works.
But even in his update, he didn't say anonymous sources.
Right, but who would know? Because he's still claiming that he's got people telling him this goes back to December.
On Twitter.
Right. Who would be these people, though? Like, you have the Sanders campaign coming out saying that this is not true. This goes back to, the work went back to February. We have The Guardian saying that Sirota informed them that in mid-January, he was in talks with Sanders, and that's when the writing stopped. And, I mean, that's everyone who would know. Who is informing? I mean, again, we will never know, but if he's going to... What I'm getting at here is if he's going to just say that how would these people know, then I don't know who his sources would be who would know better.
I mean, honestly, this feels like... It feels like sort of shifting the goalposts a little bit. Like his original claim was that he was working for Sanders behind the scenes, and then he comes, and then that gets sort of refuted, and he comes back with, well, he was having conversations with Sanders aides, and anonymous sources have told me that. But like, if you have anonymous sources say that he was meeting with Sanders campaign aides, in 2018, why isn't that in your original draft? And why isn't that in your update? Why do you just insinuate it in your update? You don't actually attribute anything to anybody else. It adds no context to the story whatsoever.
But also, what is meeting with them? I mean, he's a reporter. He's a journalist. He's made it clear he's a progressive journalist. Meeting with Sanders to talk about progressive politics, so maybe he could get something interesting out of Sanders. So he could do reporting. Is he just talking strategy with Sanders? Basically midterm election stuff, or informing Sanders about basically running for president, trying to find out what Sanders is, where Sanders stood on that. None of that. If it's just again shooting the shit is wrong, especially being that he's made it clear who he is. He's a progressive journalist. The question would be was Sirota meeting with Sanders in 2018 and getting paid for his work? He was doing whatever work he was doing for Sanders. Then, without disclosing that, we have a real problem here, and I would throw Sirota under the bus in a second. But until you could tell me that Sirota was getting paid in some form by Sanders, meeting with Sanders means nothing.
So, fun story. Jeff Weaver said unequivocally that Sanders was doing no work for the campaign at all in 2018. At all, period. So, this whole story, Dover's story, has fallen completely apart. And I think that there was a period perhaps in February between when Sanders was, or when Sirota was seriously considering a change of career, and when he was still under the mantle of Capitol in Maine, that perhaps there could have been better disclosure on his part. But that to me is a far less serious ethical violation than trying to make facts fit when trying to make a narrative fit facts that it doesn't fit.
Right.
I think it's really troubling to see the Atlantic put out a story like this and allowing such a damning claim to be not attributed to a direct quote, but the author's interpretation of a quote, and then to hear that there was no effort to change that once the source of that quote came out and said, this isn't accurate, and to not even reach out to the Guardian. I mean, there's so many problems with this article. The problems are legion. It's almost hard to recall every single one now.
Right. The thing is too that the Atlantic writer Dover, he in using months it's a very, vague number to put on something. What is months? And technically, he's right in terms of months by the Guardian's own timeline that Sirota told them in mid-January that he was talking with the Sanders campaign. If you want to say that from those talks he started the trial period with Sanders, that goes back months. I could say months, and that even goes back February. We're in March. I was working for someone for months. February and March equals months. It's a very vague... What was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No.
But then I ended up interrupting you because the Skype. But yeah, I mean, look. So there should be a distinction made between when you are putting feelers out and maybe pursuing a change in your in employment, and when you are under consideration for a job that's, I mean, seriously under consideration. There's been a job offered, and you are, you know what I mean? Like, kind of, you're in a trial period. There is a difference. So I think that it's fine. Whatever the Guardian decided, that he would no longer write after December. But I still, even if you talk about it in those terms, I don't think that Dauvert's article is accurate in any sense. And I think that's...
Well, what I'm saying is he being that he's not quoting the Sanders campaign directly there, he left it vague enough.
He did.
Where if he wasn't being so specific with December, then months is correct. If I told you right now that Sirota, this is my full sentence, everything I said about this so far. Sirota has been working in some capacity for the Sanders campaign for months. That one sentence is technically correct.
Not according to Sanders' campaign manager. So there was really the work really started, I was told, around February 20th. That was a direct quote from Sanders' campaign manager, which I was able to verify, was that the work really started. There was no work before that. There was consideration of a job, and then the actual unofficial work was on the 20th. So that's after everything. That's after all of his writing, and so there really isn't, in my mind at least, there really isn't an overlap.
Right. But even if let's now that we know that, though, when the Guardian tweeted, when the editor from the Guardian tweeted out that he was informed in mid-January, I guess I'm assuming now that we know from what you've gotten from the Sanders campaign, that the discussion of some sort of employment started in mid-January.
Possibility of employment if there is a campaign at all. I mean, this is the other aspect
correct.
That isn't being talked about, is that Sanders was really iffy about running for a long time. And I talked to, in the course of my other reporting on the Yemen war powers resolution and the conflict in Yemen, I would periodically talk to Ro Khanna, and one of my articles from January was a story that about Ro and the effort that he was doing, that he was carrying out in the House to get this through, and that he had been coordinating with Sanders on this resolution. And during that discussion, during my interview with him, I asked him, sort of just offhandedly, is he going to run? And he wasn't sure at that point. And that was on, I think, January 19th. So there's, and that was consistent with what I'd heard from him for a while. I mean, on multiple occasions. So I think that that's something that should be clear, is that there really wasn't a campaign. The Sanders staffers that I talked to, everybody said the campaign really took shape. The 2020 campaign took shape in mid-February. And sort of in February is when everything starts to fall into place. That's when there's the talk of, okay, so there may very well be a job. Okay, there is a job. Okay, are you going to take the job? These are all different stages. So that's why I say February might be the time where disclosure is needed most.
Right. And we'll find out if anything's up, because this information all has to be submitted and reported, official documentation. We will get that information if any campaign lied. So for a campaign to lie about this would possibly be the dumbest possible thing any campaign could do.
Right, and he didn't even accept the offer until until this month. So, I mean, I don't know. I can't. It's hard to fathom how an outlet like The Atlantic, which does great work that I respect, and shamelessly, I'll admit that I've been pitching to them for a long time. I've never gotten a piece in The Atlantic. They should let me write a piece for them once. But they do work that I respect. But this was just, I think, a disaster.
Yeah.
All things considered, this was just a disaster. And I don't see how they get through this without issuing some kind of correction or taking the article down, or something should happen.
Right.
There should be amends made.
Right. I think it's a tricky issue in terms of, in general, not in this specific case, in terms of where, journalism is going, in this internet age. And, it's not the internet, it's not going anywhere. So to call it the internet age is just like basically saying modern history, modern times. So, we're going to see basically that if you want, smart people doing reporting, there's going to be very few, there's very few positions that pay well in journalism. You're going to see they're going to have to take other jobs. And I think the industry is just going to have to come up with, a way to say that this is okay. I think disclosures are the way to do it, and everything must be disclosed in terms of any sort of connection, work relationship with any sort of campaign, organization, whatever you're working for. If a writer's covering Facebook or something and they're working for the Elizabeth Warren campaign, knowing what Elizabeth Warren's advocating for, they need to disclose that they're, what they're working on also. However, it doesn't, to me, as long as that disclosure's there and you are able to take that in, the reader's able to understand it all in that context, I think that's fine. But again, the question is, though, it's not even a question to me. The person working for Elizabeth Warren's campaign likely didn't have I like that Facebook's a monopoly view to begin with. I mean, people work for these groups because they already have or campaigns or whatever, because they already have that sort of ideology. Like, Sirota didn't, go to the Sanders campaign because, the Sanders campaign was telling him to support some sort of specific ideology, and that's what influenced Sirota's work. No, quite the opposite. Sirota's a progressive. Sanders is progressive. They line up ideologically. Sanders believes certain things. Sirota's criticized people who go against those things. And it just lines up that way. It's not like anyone was influencing the other.
So maybe the solution here is to have government stipends for journalists.
I think that would be great.
Or subsidize journalism, like real honest to God journalism. I think that's probably the direction that we're going, because you have
the problem there is anyone who's wrapped up in the RT and Telesur and all the other all the other news organizations out there that get funding from governments. They're gonna say that this organization is funded by the U.S. government, can't be trusted. And I will agree. Like I've said on the show before, I think on certain issues, obviously you can't trust certain outlets. For example, if you want legitimate criticism on Putin, you can't go to RT. I think that you cannot go to RT for that. But RT does great work in other areas, such as covering protests, covering
their work on Occupy won awards.
Exactly, yes. But the fact that we know where they get their funding from, because it's disclosed, I mean, it's in their freaking name, Russia TV. But anyway, because we know that, we know, okay, let's see what RT's putting out. Okay, they're talking about the Kremlin. Can't trust them on this. Let me go to a different source. Oh, and here they're talking about a Black Lives Matter protest. Okay, they were on the ground, literally one of the few news organizations to be on the ground covering it. I could trust them on this one. I mean, you could say, okay, they're covering Black Lives Matter because to them, it looks badly on the U.S. government to have these protesters protesting. Fine, again, we know who they're funded by. You could have what they're covering and why in the back of your head, but it doesn't make what they're actually capturing on camera and reporting fake.
Well, so this is the thing. We are inherently more skeptical of journalists and outlets that are journalists who work for outlets that are funded by states. But we sort of accept that we have a free press, even though a lot of it is owned by billionaires or major corporations with their own set of interests. I mean, when was the last time we saw a dead body on MSNBC? When was the last time MSNBC broadcast an image of like, let's say, a child that had been blown up by an American bomb overseas? You don't have that, and the reason that you don't have that is, I mean, it's twofold. I'm gonna guess advertisers.
The last time they've shown that on TV is probably the last time Henry Kissinger was interviewed.
So television. Okay, so it might be a little bit of an unfair question because television has always been sort of family friendly.
It was a joke, a bad one. But
I'm sorry. Now I just feel like a dick. But television has always been sort of family friendly. But the point is that you don't have this kind of journalism today because it doesn't. It certainly doesn't bring in audiences. It doesn't make people want to watch. So the advertisers aren't going to be too happy. Also, with access today, where everything is built on access, it's not going to make the people in government happy and within the administration happy if you're showing this stuff, because it's definitely going to produce some kind of visceral reaction from the public. So I don't really I think that the distinction between state funded and not state funded, it's sort of a little blurry today, and maybe it was less blurry 40, 50 years ago, but today it's quite blurry. So I'm less bothered by that. I do think that subsidizing journalism with government subsidies is probably the path forward, so that we don't have billionaires like what's her face, Steve Jobs' widow, buying up newspapers everywhere. I don't know if you saw this. I posted a video clip where she's at a conference talking about buying the New York Times. Like the interviewer says, "Would you ever buy the New York Times?" She's like, "I don't know. Is it for sale?"
Right.
And she's like, "Well, you could afford it." She's like, "Yeah, a lot of people could afford it, but is it for sale?" Like, I realized a long time ago that the work that we do could be benefited by owning our own outlets, so that we can control the narrative. Like, because otherwise we could do all this good work and some journalist could come along and ruin it. And it's just like you just said the quiet part out loud. Like, that's what it's all about. It's all about crafting your narrative and getting it out there. So we need some check on that.
Right. No, I think it's a good point. So I guess what we're down to here with this specific conspiracy theory about Sirota and Bernie is that, Sirota was in talks with the Sanders campaign at some point in earlier this year. He told The Guardian and stopped writing for them. He apparently also informed the other outlet he was writing for. It was at Capital in Maine. He also stopped writing for them.
Yep.
And the Sanders campaign is saying that he worked for Sanders beforehand, meaning before he was officially hired, and they're putting this date now in mid-February. And
mid to late February.
And as far as we know now, there was never any overlap. Yes. And I think that sounds legitimate to me based on what we know. I mean, I don't see how else, like, unless someone comes out with some sort of proof, and again, we'll have proof very shortly when those FEC filings come out. We'll know when they started paying everyone.
Exactly.
So I don't really...
Controversy squashed.
Right. I mean... Now, Walker, before you go, I'm going to have to... I can't let you off the hook so easily without bringing up this piece. So
I'm guessing it's not the one on Yemen.
It's not the one on Yemen, although we'll have you on again to talk about that, because I don't think maybe 10, 15 minutes is enough to talk about that. But back in 2016... I
figured I'd plug it.
Right. No, everyone go check out Walker's work on Yemen.
It's in my pinned tweet.
For sure. And Kennedy in the YouTube comments says that you have the most journalisty name ever, by the way. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I think.
So you wrote for Salon in 2016 a liberal case for Donald Trump. The lesser of two evils is not at all clear in 2016. Now,
so let me stop you there, because the tagline was not. I mean, it's taken from the article, but whatever. Continue. We'll hash all of this. I'm assuming
as a freelance writer, you weren't a staff writer for Salon here, right?
No, I wasn't a staff writer, and I wasn't a journalist at the time. I was just writing, and this was the first. This was like, I think this might have been my third or fourth piece in Salon. Like, I had been.
So I'm assuming you didn't pick that title.
I had written that title, but it had been suggested to me that I pursue.
Right.
That and honestly, I have to say that article is almost no different from arguments that I had made in the previous pieces, which it's just a more clickbaity title, right. And it's still to this day people still cite it. I do think there is a misinterpretation of it, but I would like. Well,
that's what I'm glad. No, I'm glad, because that's what I want. Because listen, I think you do some good work. Obviously, that's why I had you on the show. But I don't let anyone off easy on this show. So I'm gonna have to give you some pushback here, and I guess to grab a line that people like to use on Twitter. This ain't it, Chief. So please, I'm going to allow you some room here to try to. I don't think you're going to succeed here with me, but I'm going to allow you to argue this. What were you trying to argue in this piece?
So it comes down to three things. One, that if Trump were elected, he would be ineffectual as a president, and would inspire backlash like we haven't really seen before or since Bush. And I felt at the time that liberals were somewhat complacent, and that might be understating my feelings at the time, because I felt like I was watching an election where Clinton was staking out these positions that were kind of to the right of Obama in some respects, or saying things that were to the right of Obama. And like, we had an opportunity as Democrats at the time. I very strongly identified with the party. I wasn't doing journalism. I was just, as I said, writing. I kind of fell into journalism in that election cycle. So I felt that if Trump were elected, he would be ineffectual. He would inspire backlash, and ultimately he would lose in 2020, which is a census year. Whereas Clinton would get crushed in the midterms and in 2020. I mean, the last time we had two presidents from the same party win back-to-back 2 terms, do you know who they were? the two presidents?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
So there's a reason, and that's because it didn't happen in modern history. It was James Madison and James Monroe. So I looked at 2020. I looked at 2010 when the Republicans swept and they killed at the state level, and they redistricted Congress, and they held Congress for 8 years. I mean, it took Trump in the White House to dislodge the Republican majority in the House. And I thought at the time that if we're going to get anything done, if we're going to address the problems that this country faces, we really need a House that is either democratic to progressive. So I figured the best way to do that would be to win 2020. And if Clinton were top of the ticket, I didn't see that happening. So that was the argument. I definitely downplayed, unintentionally, downplayed some of the very real concerns that people had about Donald Trump, and I respect that, and I understand why people got very upset. But I would also clarify that I was not encouraging people to vote for Donald Trump, more taking the position that if you vote your conscience, it's fine. I myself voted for Jill Stein, and I endorsed her actually on CNN.
Oh no!
Yes. So this is where I was at in 2016. 2020, I think I'm on a sort of a different page. I think that the Democrat, whoever that is going to be running on likely the most progressive platform that any candidate has ever run on, any mainstream candidate has ever run on in history. And I think that that's an important thing. Also with the census, it's kind of do or die. And especially with climate change knocking at the door, it's do or die.
So you would vote for a Democratic nominee, Beto O'Rourke, or a Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris?
I'm not going to comment on who I would vote for, but
that's fine. That's fine.
Just personally, that was a big lesson for me in 2016, is because I didn't want to be. I found that I was very much defined by my choice of candidate in 2016, and then the position that I had taken in 2016, and that was fine for commenting and sort of being a talking head kind of person. But as I've gotten more into journalism and started doing more stories that I think are important, certainly more important than just kind of shooting the shit about politics, it's more important for that work to be viewed on its merits rather than associate it with a candidate or a campaign or even a political affiliation. Yes, I will say I am a progressive. I think it is important to beat Donald Trump in 2020, but that's right. As far as I'll go.
Oh, that's cool. So, but let's get back to this piece, because I need to ask you, because you mentioned that you clearly, from your work and everything, obviously, you're not the same person you were almost 3 years ago now. Do you stand by that you think that a Donald Trump presidency was better for liberals, progressives, whatever, than a Hillary Clinton presidency would have been?
So this is not going to satisfy anybody, but in some ways, I think no. I think to a lot of people in this country that are actively suffering under Donald Trump, it's sort of a meaningless. Looking that far ahead is sort of meaningless and in some ways kind of monstrous. But at the same time, I think that a lot of the things that I said, that I suggested in that article, have sort of played out. I mean, Trump's major legislative accomplishment is tax reform. He has not really done anything else legislatively that he can tout as an accomplishment. He has failed on healthcare. He can't work with his own party. So I think there's some of that. There has been a historic grassroots uprising against him. We've seen the Democratic Party move to the left. I know that a lot of people feel that it's not happening fast enough, but I will stress that what we're seeing now is nothing less than an uprising. It's happening in media. It's happening within the party. The culture is shifting in large part because Trump is elected. So I don't know if I'm the one really to say whether it's better, I think, or worse, because I feel like that might be an individual, that I think that is an individual answer. A lot of people are struggling now more than they would be perhaps under Clinton, or at least feeling more anxious than they would under Clinton, and I have great sympathy for that. I feel, right. I think that my piece did not adequately address their concerns, and I think that I at the time did not adequately appreciate their concerns. And so for that, I completely understand the anger, but at the same time, I am hopeful for the future. And I think that there is a lot of reason for people on the left and even Democrats and people who don't think we're heading in the right direction now to be hopeful for the future. Right. No, I think you said what I guess I was going to say to you if you had the opposite answer. I think that's a great point that you made in terms of, like you said, your article. I would argue that your article was correct about the point that Donald Trump would not be able to get anything done legislatively. We've seen that. But I think, that's probably the one point you had that ended up coming true. The whole conversation really hasn't been changed. He still is the same person as pretty much all the other Republican presidents when it comes to basically, I guess, if we want to use his terminology, the swamp. So let me clarify that the national conversation. I don't think Trump has changed anything about the Republican Party or who he is, but I think that the dialogue now. I mean, reparations is an issue in a Democratic primary, right? In 2019, and there has been a massive outcry among Democrats. We now have popular support for Medicare for all. Democrats who weren't in favor of it in 2016 are now like, well, maybe that is the path forward. So I think these are positive things. I don't think those things came though as a result of Trump. I do agree that, if we're going to take something good out of a Trump presidency, one of the things we got out of this was that he's lit a fire under people who maybe weren't politically active before, and they're very interested in politics, many of them liberal and progressive. But I think, when it comes to a lot of the things you mentioned, we're on that way. If you want to say Trump sped that up, I think that could be a legitimate argument. But the reparations conversation has been ongoing, and really, I would say the spark for that was lit in 2016 with Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece. Yep. And, I think, that was prior to President Trump, and I think it would have continued in that fashion. It was, but Democrats were timid. Democrats were, and to an extent they still are. But I think there's more of a willingness to embrace outspoken leftism or progressivism today than there was in 2016. And part of that is because they realized that what they thought was pragmatic really wasn't quite so pragmatic, and he lost to a dime store clown in a pretty humiliating way. So you have to adapt. I forget the headline or where it was, but it was something like, "The Clinton era of neoliberalism is dead. What a waste." It was something like that. And I think that was so prescient. I think that to me is really what we saw out of this. And I think, going back to your piece, to me, the worst thing about a Trump presidency, and I think it's the thing that automatically would, there's a number of things, obviously, that all that you brought up, though, I think, that, kills that whole Trump would be better conversation. Unless you're an anarchist and just wanted to see. There was a piece that I saw where it was from an anarchist saying, like, I support Trump because he's going to bring all out destruction to everything. A lot of people felt that way. Right. I think a lot of people were very angry and felt left behind. You also had a lot of alienation. But like you said for yourself too, it totally ignored the groups that were going to be most hurt by Trump, honestly. And I think, Trump pulled through when it came down to it in terms of he hurt the people he said he was going to hurt, and he kept his word on that point. But for me, the thing that was the number one argument
and against the whole, why Hillary Clinton was the better of the two evils, was simply, when it comes down to it, the courts. And what Trump has done to the court, not just the Supreme Court, is something that no matter what, whether it be, pushing forward progressivism, an awakening in people, whether it's, I don't know, whether it's any of the things that you could possibly argue, I think none of it at all lives up to the fact that we'll be dealing with his judges for a generation.
Well, okay, so the court, I think the court the panic over what Trump is doing to the courts is somewhat overblown. And believe me, if tomorrow the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, I'm sure that there will be people demanding my head on a pike. But hear me out.
Let's say this, though. The good thing for you, if that happened, would be people wouldn't refer to a liberal case for Donald Trump as the first thing they want to own you with.
Right. It would be this right now. So when I say that people are too freaked out about the courts, I mean that there has always been an ability to add justices or subtract justices to the court. There is nothing in the Constitution that delimits a number of Supreme Court justices. And I know that this takes political will, and it costs political capital. But besides the fact that people die unpredictably, there is a safeguard with the court. So I'm less freaked out about the court. It's also a reactive branch of government, whereas Congress is an active branch. In order to get any legislation through at all, you need Congress. So I weighed in 2016. I weighed Congress more heavily than I weighed the courts, having gone through law school in that time. I probably still weigh Congress more heavily than the courts. And I think there's a legitimate disagreement to be had there. There are good points on both sides. Like, I think I brought up a pretty hefty one if the court overturned Roe versus Wade. So that is a very real argument that people can make, and I understand it. But Congress could prevent any action on climate change. A Republican Congress for the next 10 years could prevent any action on climate change and ensure that 30 years down the road we haven't done anything and we're in significant trouble, which, by the way, will not just affect it will affect everybody, but it will affect most the people who were vulnerable in 2016. Those same people will likely still be more vulnerable than people like me. You know what I'm getting at?
I see what you're saying. No, I see what you're saying. Like, I think you could make an argument for both. I think the court argument is stronger because it's really more direct. What you're worried about is like a domino effect, whereas the court issue I'm bringing up is literally like a direct effect.
Well, not necessarily even a domino. I mean, climate change is just one issue. We have kids in their 20s dying from rationing insulin. If we don't address that in the next few years, people will die. People will continue to die. People die all the time because they can't afford medical costs. People die of preventable illnesses every single day. It is something that we don't talk about. It's something that we should talk about. We wouldn't be able to check a president on war powers. A Republican Congress has already shown that it will not check a president on war powers. Those are very tangible, very real bodies piling up overseas.
Well, another domino effect I was sort of referring to is, when you were making the case that, why the liberal case for a Donald Trump presidency now, because it'll be better in the future for progressive and liberals. The assumption is, I know you have your historical context for that assumption, but again, it's a domino effect. The assumption is that Trump gets in or Hillary gets in, and this happens at the next midterms, and this happens with Congress. It's not as direct as if Trump gets elected, he will appoint the judges. Hands down, no need to speculate on how the political climate will be in the midterms. No need to wonder if Hillary or Trump will be the third president to not have that consecutive party, full party control of government. That's sort of what I'm referring to as well when it comes to it's a more direct. Like I could have told you in 2016 that Donald Trump will appoint terrible people to the courts. These are lifetime appointments. You couldn't tell me in 2016 with certainty that 2018 midterms would be a slam dunk for Democrats.
It's true, but I did suggest that the 2018 midterms would be a pretty slam dunk for Democrats.
Right, so, but you couldn't.
I understand. I don't want to.
For example,
I don't want to misrepresent your argument or straw man it. So I do understand what you're saying. You can't know what was going to happen.
Let's put it this way: Bernie Sanders wins 2020. Are we going to argue that if we want to keep a Democratic Congress, we got to elect the Republican in 2024?
Well, no. So what made 2020 so special is that it was a census year. So when the census happens, over the next year, the congressional districts, every time there's a census, it precedes a redistricting of the state legislatures and the House.
Right, but this happens regardless, though.
But it doesn't happen. It only happens once every 10 years. And the Republicans last time recognized that there was a census around the corner in 2010, and they poured money into the state races in what was known as Red Map. And they really – and Obama – Karl Rove put out an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal explaining this plan, and the Democrats didn't really react, and they got crushed. And the Republicans – gerrymandered the state legislatures and they gerrymandered the House, and we've been living with that ever since. Even now, the Democrats took the House in 2018, which was astounding. I was floored when that happened, but they underperformed at the state level. There wasn't enough money or whatever for whatever reason, they didn't do as well at the state level as they did at the national level. And that was, I think, a large part a testament to the Republican redistricting. And those state legislatures, by the way, pass laws that affect people very directly.
But I guess what I'm also saying here is that the gerrymandering would have happened regardless too. I mean, this is the Republican Party we're talking about. I mean, I know what you're saying about the plan was put out there and it was for everyone to see. But I mean, census year or not, they were going to do what they do.
Sure, in the states that they control. But that's the thing. The state legislatures will draw the districts. Well, they'll draw their own districts. They'll draw the House districts. So if you have a Republican majority, if the Republican Party controls a majority of state legislatures, you can pretty much bet that the Republican Party will control a majority of House seats and state legislatures going forward. And that means disenfranchising a lot of people, which is something that I don't think we should overlook. But But I do think that what we're getting at is that there are legitimate points on both sides of this. I think that when people see the title, they assume that article is saying, Hillary is equally bad to Trump. And that's not really the point of the article. That I think overall a Hillary presidency would have been far better than a Trump presidency in the immediate.
Right. No, I just, I had to bring up, I could not have someone who wrote that article, regardless of what else, come on the show and not bring it up. You had to deal with it for a bit. I'm sorry, buddy.
I don't take offense. I do not take offense.
But I'm glad to hear that you are where you are now. Personally, I don't think you should defend it even as much as you do, even though you have the right outlook now that you put in there. If I was you, I'd just say, I know better. That wasn't the right take.
Well, we'll see. I mean, ultimately, we'll see. No, I understand that, and there are people who react pretty viscerally to it.
No, I think listen. I think you do. From what I've seen, you do good work. So that's why I had you on the show, man. And thank you for debating me on that. And someone sent me this actually. It'd be dumb for me not to bring this up. Important to point out that David Sirota's Beto O'Rourke piece that looked into his voting record and then David Sirota also did those tweets where he looked into where Beto's contributions came from. That all led to a report by Alex Koch in Sludge that found out that O'Rourke broke a no fossil fuel money pledge that he signed, which caused that group to basically rescind having O'Rourke on their list of people who pledged not to take fossil fuel money. So, it's clear that everything that was going on there was based, in fact, on legitimate information, factual information, and it led to something real.
Right. I don't buy this narrative that he was that Sirota is an attack dog who goes off half cocked and doesn't and misrepresents things. He has, from what I've seen of his work, and I have seen a lot of his work, he is extremely thorough. He was a fantastic journalist. I'm sure he'll make a fantastic speechwriter. It's just kind of a shame that I think that the reaction was sort of what it was.
Right. So
there is a certain amount of disappointment that's okay, though, because we do lose a journalist, and every time we lose a journalist, it's
our loss is Bernie Sanders' gain, I guess. Michael Brooks from the Michael Brooks Show and the Majority Report just jumped in the YouTube chat, and I think we should end it with this. Michael Brooks says, "Great work on Yemen to you, Walker." So there you go. So I guess if you get the Michael Brooks approval on your Yemen work, I'm gonna have to have you on the show to talk strictly the Yemen stuff.
Well, let's do it. It doesn't get talked about enough, and I'll give Michael a plug. I like his show. I've seen a lot of it, and
we don't have to. So we don't have to do.
Sorry.
We don't have to do that here. That's not necessary. All right, everybody, let's get this guy off the channel, off the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Walker Bragman. He's an independent journalist. He does great work on Yemen, according to Michael Brooks. I agree with that assessment. Don't agree with the assessment on Michael Brooks. But Walker, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, take care, man.
Hey, you as well.
All right, everybody. I love the Skype sound. Bloop, bloop. All right. Michael, I love you in the YouTube chat over there. Michael says Matt got cucked. Oof. Yeah, that was rough. Ooh. Promoting Michael Brooks' show on this show. It's an easy way to make sure you never get invited again. Oh, sorry, Walker. Oh, man. Oh. No. Michael says Walker fucking cucked you. Ha 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 ha. All right. Oof. Ugh. Ladies and gentlemen, to support this show, you could go to patreon.com/MattBinder. I asked for a measly $5. If $5 is not measly to you, then please do not become a subscriber. I do not want anyone who doesn't have the monetary, financial means to do that. Don't put any burden on yourself. But for those of you who do, for those of you who look at $5 as a measly $5, for those of you who find $5 on the floor outside, maybe, walking down the street outside your local 7-Eleven, you find $5 on the floor, you pick it up, scoff at it, crumple it up, and throw it back down on the sidewalk. You should probably become a patron. You will support this show. You will help the show grow. It would be fantastic if you can do that. You could also support this show by going to iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave an iTunes review. Subscribe to the iTunes feed. Leave a written iTunes review even. It would be a big help to the show. If you haven't done so yet and you're listening, I mean, what is the excuse? Come on. It's free to do that. Go to iTunes, press the star button. Go to iTunes, write a sentence, if that's all you want to write, of a review. Please, come on. Don't be so lazy. Also, you can support this show by going to our YouTube channel. You can go, there's two easy ways you can go. Doomed.tv will take you right to the YouTube channel. And also, youtube.com/MattBinder will take you right to the YouTube channel. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy? I don't know. I don't even know what that means. Michael, did YouTube, you're in the chat right now, did YouTube ever monetize you? Because I got my answer from YouTube. And even though I hit all the monetization guidelines, they turned me down for monetization. And I need to wait 30 days to monetize, to apply again. And their reasoning for turning me down for monetization is duplicative content. And I certainly do not post duplicative content. And I know you are having a similar issue with YouTube monetization. So it is I find this very, very frustrating. Well, ladies and gentlemen, going to go to the second half of the show, an abridged second half of the show. Yeah, you can't super chat me because until I get that monetization approval. That's the part that sucks. You got what try did you get monetized, Michael? I mean, the obvious answer is that until I get monetized, you must become a Patreon subscriber because that's the only way you can support this show monetarily. Oh, and before I go to that second half, on the fourth try, Michael said, "Geez." All right, well, this month's patrons, and then we'll go straight to the other half of the show. Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Andrew H, Ayasaka Communist, Benji A, Bobby M, Brooke H, Chi, Christine H, Clement C, Colin R, Cecily C, Dank Uger, Dave K, David Z, Dragon Slayer, Dum Dum Dum, Emily M, Fraz K, Francis Zek, FTW All Day, Greg D, Ian Curtis J, Jameson Test, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeff K, Jordan V, Joseph R, Josh C, Katie S, Marcos R, Max W, User Me, Michael J, Michael M, Misfit Demit, Mr. Danks, Nicole A, Namde Net, Omid M, Romina O, Cena, Struggle Session, TM, Tammy G, Thaddeus A, Tina M, Tom G, Tom M, Trinae E, Will P, and Zarin. Folks who are not Patreon subscribers or YouTube live watchers, see you all next time on Doomed. All right, welcome to the Patron-only Doomed feed, everybody. Let's get right to this good stuff. I'm going to go through the comments, and we got Ryan. Kent State Confederate Barbie is a flat earther thanks to Logan Paul. Oh, I think she's a grifter. That's really what she's up to there. It's a good play. Why not, right? Ryan says, it's possible it's all a lay epic troll irony, lol, but she's dumb enough that there's a good chance she's serious. It's a little bit of both. It's a troll, and I wouldn't be surprised if she believed it. The sad thing is she's from when I spoke to her, she was not bright, but she was I don't want to say intelligent. I don't know what word to use, but she seemed like she was all there. She had a ways to go, but she could get on the right track. She seemed like, but guess it was all just a facade. Wah, wah. Dang says it's more like low-level trolling that only people her age are still doing if they're really dumb and desperate for attention. Right, probably, yeah. What could we do? Do we really want to spend time talking about the gun girl when she refuses to come back on the show? She thinks she's too big for Doomed. She thinks she's too big for Matt Binder. Get out of here. Zarin says the haircut is a lie. No, I promised that if Beto raised a significant amount of money, I would get a haircut. So I didn't say when, but no, it'll be soon. Give me like a week or two and I'll get a haircut. Right. Renee says Bree would have been enough. Brian says Sirota is an OG Bernie bro. Remember, Bree was a guest on this show. You can go back in the Doomed archives. Unfortunately, it was pre the YouTube live stream, but go back in the Doomed archives and check out the podcast version. I think it was episode 7, maybe. Misha says Samantha B has been taking swipes at Bernie. She's still mad. I'd buy that for $1. Says Matt's gonna get a real small man bun. I will not be doing that. No, sirree, Bob. No man bun from Matt Binder. Sorry. Brian says B sucks less because of her politics and more because she can be terribly unfunny. Samantha B's got her moments. My issue with her is more so her and her husband's public school advocacy. Yeah, look into that. Brian says, yes, acclaimed kingmaker journalist Sirota totally cleared the field for Bernie. Right. It couldn't be clearer who Sirota is as a progressive journalist. And also, you just pointed out that he doesn't have the power. He's not a powerful, like, mainstream media journalist. He doesn't have those connections. Renee says, anyone saw Paul Joseph Watson's article on Jamie Peck's anti-white bias? Wait, Paul Joseph Watson wrote about Jamie Peck? Are you serious? Where was this? Oh my god, Siri just heard me say, hey Siri. What? I didn't say hey Siri. So weird. Wait, but Paul Joseph Watson wrote about Jamie Peck? What? Where is this? Someone send this to me. Oh my god. Whoa. InfoWars has like a complete like banner with a picture of Jamie. What? Wait. We are in a war, Jamie tweeted, we are in a war between those who choose to be human and those who choose to be white. In order to effectively stamp out fascism, we must take on all hierarchies at once. White supremacy cannot be disentangled from patriarchy and class oppression. Liberalism is not the answer. And the InfoWars headline by Paul Joseph Watson is, Guardian writers suggest white people aren't human in bizarre tweet. Well, first of all, to correct the record, the better, more accurate description of Jamie is, Majority Report producer suggests white people aren't human in bizarre tweet. And then I would say everything's cool. Everything's fine. Once that correction's made, I'm fine with it. All right, let's move on. No, but I mean, it's pretty clear what Jamie's saying here. You can choose to identify as a human being and reject white supremacy, or you can choose your identifier to be that you're a white person, and the reason you would do that is because you're a white supremacist. Because, no white people center the fact that they're white. No white people who aren't white supremacists. I mean, if that's what she's saying. I mean, maybe it's my interpretation of it, and I believe that's her interpretation of it true too. Certainly not whatever InfoWars is saying. Oh, wait, there's more. Oh, they even gave Antifada a shout out. Jeez. Oh, man, I gotta piss off the InfoWars guys. Again, I'm doing a really bad job promoting this show. Guys, this is not good. I need to get on InfoWars. This is very disappointing. Very disappointing. Well, what can I do? Oh, I could piss off Paul Joseph Watson. That'll get me some attention from them, right? All right, let's get to the next comments here. Dank says, not a lot of jobs doing journalism if you aren't doing political journalism, and most of them are advocacy ones. No, there's a lot of journalism jobs. Probably more journalism jobs in general than political journalism. To be honest. Sports is a big one. Renee says, Matt Binder could be Bernie's pro wrestling hype man. I should reach out to the campaign, see if they need a Paul Heyman. My client, Bernie Sanders, is the reigning, defending. I could do that, yeah. I think that'll work. The Beast, Bernard Sanders. What, at the end of this, there'll be, 21 Democratic primary candidates who lose, and Bernie Sanders will be the winning the nomination, and so I could go, he is the one in 21-1. Ooh, that'd be perfect. Ooh, I like that. All right. Brian says, I think Paul Joseph Watson chemically castrated himself by now with all those soy brain force pills and all. All right, that's a good one. Brian says, they're just pissy because Sirota had spent the last 2 years shitting on their tone-deaf journalism. It's more than that, I would say. But it's partially that. Listen, I think Sirota gets into these spats, feeds into these spats, or did feed into these spats a little more than necessary a lot of the times. That's my criticism of Sirota. And it probably hurt his overall perception from some people. But I would say about 90 to 95% of those some people would not like him anyway. So, yeah, it really doesn't matter. Zarin says, ultimately, even with this story being discredited or not, it's not going to change those facts, and that's the root of all of this. For mainstream pundits and Beltway operatives, hiring sort of reinforces their Bernie hate, and no one else gives a shit. Right. This episode was to me another episode where I was like, oh, there's a conspiracy, a controversy going on online. This is doomed material. I would much prefer doing right-wing stuff. The next episode will definitely be talking about right-wing stuff. Already got some great guests lined up. Just need to confirm who's coming up next. I'm also going to be doing another like debunker show like I did for the Tim Pool Joe Rogan episode, where it's basically just me. We're going to watch a long a number of clips together, and we'll debunk those. That's an episode coming up soon as well. Yeah, folks, I'm preparing in advance. This is, you guys you're all patrons, but stick with me as patrons, and I'll be able to continue looking far ahead and working these shows out in advance. Dank says he would Sirota at the very least would have to be disclosed if he was writing on it. Right. Dank says, I can't say it's not a hit job on Sirota, but when I went back in the other articles that guy has written, he has a bunch of clickbait articles. Well, it's sort of the way things go now. Zarin says, Sirota's journalism and writing was obviously always pretty pro-Bernie, so I don't get, we would just say, yeah, I don't think Beto's taking oil money is okay. He wouldn't. Right. Misha says, Sirota. Very good, Misha. I enjoyed that, to be honest. Even though I sounded like I was being sarcastic. Oh, man, from drinking all this Dr. Pepper, I think I have a hiccup. The hiccup's coming on. I'm sorry. Zarin says, I don't think Bernie decided until like a month ago. Well, I think, beginning on Feb, I guess that's almost 2 months now. Listen, I think that regardless of whether Bernie decided for sure or not, I think there's a good chance that there were people who gathered and discussed this stuff and reached out to certain people to see if they'd be interested if there was a campaign. I mean, the campaign just doesn't spring up from the ground like plants grow or something. It needed to get to that point. But again, if it was just like, hey, would you be interested if this happened? And he said, yeah, sure. That's not. If that's all it was, then there's nothing official. There's no sort of communication in any other way. Then I don't know what you would say in that regard. It just seems moot there. Brian says, honestly, though, if Bernie did have Sirota on the payroll, I don't give a fuck. Just keeping it 100. I disagree with you there, but that's your opinion, man. Brian says, random people who stumble upon this podcast. Who the F is Sirota? Oh, I think we gave a small primer up top. JGM Hicks says, if the Atlantic didn't pick Walker up, that's their loss. Zarin said, yeah, this campaign was deliberately started early. First debate in June. Normally first debate is August or September. Yeah, everything's starting early. Dank says he wasn't paying for his 2020 campaign in December. Right. Bullwhip says the first people to arrive at the party are usually the least important. People started announcing in 2018. That's not normal. Right, and we have John Delaney out there who's been running. Legitimately been doing events in Iowa and New Hampshire for years now. I think Andrew Yang even started in 2018. Thank you, Kennedy, for enjoying the joke about Henry Kissinger. You're the one person who laughed. I think Dank did too. Dank says Louise Mensch actually believes Black Lives Matter was an RT conspiracy, actually. Oh, yes. I think I've talked about that before. Maybe not on this show, though. I need to do an episode on Louise Mensch. I think I probably mentioned her before. I did, when I was with Cafe, I did an episode of The Real Fake News on Louise Mensch. Ooh, Renee says Walker's name should be Walker Bragman. Ooh. Kennedy Crouch on Walker's list of liberal reasons to support Trump is number 1. You got duped. That's it. That's the list. He grew from that. So that time, I mean, that's all I was hoping for. You guys know me. I wasn't going to let someone get off right or left with some bullshit. I wasn't going to not confront them about it. I think after talking with him about it, I think we got legitimate answers. I think he's still a little bit too defensive about it. But I think his overall takeaway from writing that piece now in the year 2019 is that he was wrong. Even if he's defending some of those points, the overall belief from Walker now is that he was not correct. Hillary Clinton, without a doubt, would have been a better president. And he, again, not to mischaracterize what he's saying, he wasn't saying Donald Trump would have been a better president. He said Donald Trump would have been the better route for liberals to go for future actions. And now he's saying that that's incorrect. Hillary would have been. Brian says the only person he thinks could actually lose to Trump is O'Rourke. He's such a wimp. I was impressed with Beto's comment about Netanyahu. Wasn't expecting that from him. Saying that he aligns himself with racists. I think you could go a step further and not say he'll just say that he aligns himself with them. He himself is one. But coming from Beto, I was impressed. Still, he's at the bottom of my list, though. Guy's got too much wrong with his... But maybe he'll continue to evolve. Listen, for the primaries, Bernie's my guy. What comes after Bernie, if there is an after Bernie in terms of him losing, it's Warren. If Warren's not around after Bernie, then I'll support whoever goes up against Trump. But before that, it'll be difficult for me to decide if I have to do a primary pick between someone who isn't Bernie or Warren. Renee says Kellyanne, wife of the year. Dank says CNN just ran some Kellyanne love. Oh yeah, there was some weird gushing Kellyanne videos from CNN recently. Like a profile from Dana Bash. What the hell? I think they were using like the hashtag badass woman in DC or something like that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. They've criticized her for lying to them on TV on a regular basis. You gotta be kidding me. Thomas says Shapiro was on Dr. Phil yesterday getting publicity for his book. Well, not surprising. Not surprising at all. Dr. Phil, along with himself being terrible, is a big Kid Rock fan, so it wouldn't be surprising if his politics aligned with that as well. Bullup says, I don't see the mainstream media really leading the way here, but everyone except Pelosi agrees that Trump's got to go. Right? Listen, they really led the hashtag resistance types on with this, with both impeachment and the Trump-Russia connection. They are probably going to reap some sort of blowback from pushing that stuff so hard, and then with impeachment not going through with it, and then with the Russiagate stuff, Mueller not basically finding what they hope he's going to find. And I can't say people like me haven't warned them about it. I mean, especially on the Russia stuff. I did, multiple episodes at the very least. If not multiple full episodes, one full episode for sure, and then talked about it over multiple episodes. About the Russia involvement and how it was being overblown. And how what did exist would not implicate Trump. Wouldn't surprise me if we get like a Donald Jr., I said, or as we saw other people at the campaign. But Trump was going to get off scot-free. I mean, the guy looks out for number one himself. There's no way there was going to be any connection going back to him. And if there was, he would have found a way out of it. Found a way to explain it away. I will be shocked. I mean, it's starting to look like I'm not going to be shocked, but I will be shocked if Trump is implicated in that way. Zarin says there's a Shapiro billboard I see fairly regularly. Kennedy says hating Trump stands in for class analysis among a lot of liberals, and we wouldn't have that problem under a Dem president. Great point, Kennedy. Great point. Dan says, I don't know. I voted for Hill Dog. I did as well. Jay Gerber says, right, court appointments when I was debating with Walker, right. Dan says he voted for Hill Dog and lives in California. Yes, I voted for Hill Dog and lived in New York. Thomas says, yeah, a lot of those appointments were made to years vacant seats, right? Right. Dragon Slayer says, Binder bringing out the Sam Cedar arguments. Well, they're legitimate arguments. Brian says Brian says Binder studied well. Well, I mean, talk to Sam Cedar. I mean, I worked with Sam Cedar for how many years? Almost 5 full years. Being in a room with the guy 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Sometimes we're doing, night stuff or whatever, more than that. Yeah, he'll rub off on you a bit, Renee says Matt needs a Spanish speaker to co-host. C. Dank says Walker is slightly misled about the debate we were having, but you can tell he means well. JJ Ribber says, fuck, just admit you were wrong, Walker. No, I thought, well, listen, I'm glad he had the debate with me. Derek says, who's this cuck on the right? And he wasn't talking about me. It was very nice to see Michael Brooks in the chat, by the way. I don't know if he's still in the chat, but Michael, it was nice to see you, my friend. Michael said that I signed an NDA on how big a cuck Binder is. Oh, he misspelled that. It was, I signed an NDA on how big of a cock Binder has. Oh boy, Michael, that was. Oh my God, what am I doing? Michael just brought me down to that level. Oh man, oh man. Oh man. Oh boy. I'm reading over this Michael Brooks. Oh my God. When Walker name dropped the Michael Brooks show. Everyone's jumping in at me, saying I got cucked. Even JJM Hicks. LOL, Binder. Ryan, Binder getting cucked by Brooks on his own show, right? Right. Dank said, though, that's like when someone calls into the Michael Brooks show trying to talk about Majority Report. JJM says that was payback for when Michael got cucked by Matt at the MR Live show. I think you're talking about the other Matt, though, right? Yeah. Oh, wait. No. You're talking about the first MR Live show when I... Yeah, right. Okay. When I cucked Michael. I'd buy that for $1. Says, might as well have been promoting Jimmy Dore. You talking about Walker? Nah, because Walker admits where he was wrong. Right, so Michael Brooks got monetized and I didn't. So you can't. Renee says we got a super chat Binder. Well, you can't, buddy, because I did not get the monetization yet. Unbelievable, though. Brian says Binder's been shadow banned. Unbelievable. I should make a big deal about it like conservatives do, right? Michael says, good night, guys. Peace and love. Free Lula and tell YouTube to monetize Matt. So stupid. Right, well, I gotta wait a month now. Mid-April. There'll be 4 more episodes of Doomed, including this one. So 3 more after this before I could apply for monetization. And then there'll be another few episodes after that while they look over the reapplication, the new application. Dragon Slayer says, after Lula, second greatest political prisoner of our time, Matt Binder's YouTube channel. Bullwhip says, Gun Girl is clueless meets NRA. Dragon Slayer says, will it be a Beto haircut? No, I will not be getting a Beto haircut. No. Dank says, I have one question for Binder. Did you see the David Starr, pro wrestler for non-wrestling fans, promo on Israel that really upset Sinclair Broadcasting? Bix did an article on it for Deadspin today. Gotta ask him about it if you do another WrestleMania show like you did last year, especially since it's your neck of the woods this year. Funny you should say that. Before that Deadspin article even was published, I knew about it from Bix. And I am aware of 2 other pro wrestling articles he's working on, at least 2 other, that intersect pro wrestling and politics. And also, some of them, conspiracy theory too, which is like, ooh, the doomed, hits all the doomed points right there. And he is one of the guests I alluded to earlier. I'm not sure if he'll be on this upcoming week or the week after. It will certainly be before WrestleMania for our annual WrestleMania show. And I will let you know when we do it. But it's already in the works, buddy. Already on top of it. The Bix is going to be back on the show. Bullup says you got to go after Alex Jones. Right. I got to get on InfoWars. That's what I want to do. That's right. I want to get on InfoWars. Come on, you gotta go on InfoWars at least once if you're good at this shit. Cause you just gotta troll them. It'd be great. It'd be great. Come on. If I got Alex Jones ripping his shirt off, banging on his desk, come on, it'd be perfect. It'd be great. DHZBD, did I miss the haircut update? Yes, you did. I will be getting it, my friend. I am keeping my word. I just haven't had a chance. Yeah, that's right, guys. Jamie Peck is everything InfoWars despises. Right. Renee's asking my dad, who jumped in the chat, did you get him into wrestling, Papa Binder? Yes, he did. At the young age of 3. Actually. Jesse says, when you were defending judges by arguing people die randomly, it's time to recheck your arguments. Arcanite says, I'll take Tulsi over Warren. I will not. Thomas says, remember, if Tulsi wins, Kennedy has to change her name to Tulsi. Is that right, Kennedy? Was that your bet? I went with the haircut and you went with a name change. Lord Erinion says, DSA endorsed Bernie officially. No surprise. Did they? Well, good. Did not see that. Thomas says 5 years under the yoke of the king of Majority Report, right? JJM Hicks says Sam rubbed off on Matt. Hashtag Matt too. Very funny, JJM Hicks. Oh, very funny. Dank says way too much cucking going on at the MR studio. Oh man, there was cucking going on all over the place when I worked there. Namdenet said, that reminds me of my all-time favorite MR clip of the kid calling in about the bell curve. Was that when I was there? I don't remember. I don't remember. And Kennedy is not in here to... Looks like Kennedy left the chat, and I do not know if the name change is the equivalent to my haircut. But we'll find out next time, because Kennedy is usually in the chat. Kennedy was in the chat earlier. Misha says, Kennedy, come back. Maybe she fell asleep. Well, it's getting late. The main show went long, but still gave you guys a good patron-only portion of the show. And I'm getting tired. Oh, Dragon Slayer said the bell curve thing was post-Binder, but still in the Kelly era. Right. Listen, I actually think some of the best Cedar stuff happened under me, but that's just me being, I guess I'm bragging a bit. Listen, Majority Report won Best Politics and News Podcast 4 years in a row when a certain someone was producer. When that certain someone wasn't producer anymore, that streak ended. I'll leave it at that, all right, guys? I'll leave it at that. So, everybody, I will see you all next time on Doomed.